Hello, everyone. This is Rick, and welcome to Astral Club. This is Saving Guard Pedro. Before we get into it, just want to mention Patreon. If you want to support me and the channel on Patreon, there's a link in the description. If you're interested in astral projection lessons, hey, there's an email there. Ask for more info. I want to use this time now, though, to thank everyone. I want to thank the new subscribers, but I really want to thank the folks who've been with me now for years. Y'all are my spiritual bedrock. When I'm out there, especially on some tough projections, it makes me feel better to know that I've got you guys there backing me up spiritually, and I'm not alone. And I want you to know that I appreciate that, and I don't take it for granted. Okay, let's get into this. Last week, when I posted the recent episode about the trip to the future, a couple hundred years from now, when the U.S. is now an empire with a emperor, and I was part of a U.S. Royal Guard. And real briefly, my first experience, I arrived there, and we stopped off at this old tourist location that was all beaten up. Maybe it was damaged during the Civil War. I don't know. I started exploring the weapons. I picked out this weird grenade-looking thing, and I decided to toss it in the river, which was, only a number of yards really away from the hotel. I thought that it would make the typical explosion that a grenade does in the water. I won't tell you how I know that, but I just know that. So I initiated the thing, I threw it into the water, and the entire river erupted. Well, I escaped unseen, and I took another one from my buddy Pedro's haversack and put it in mine so my guy wouldn't get caught, my future self. Now, I knew that Pedro would be okay because he was out there on the veranda with 3 female soldiers, so he was quite the Casanova. So I knew he'd be okay because he had an alibi. Then I went the next time, which was the recent episode, the combat episode, where we arrived. I arrived in a body as we were boarding the bus to go on a mission. There was an ambush. The bus using these battle stations wiped out the ambush, except for one rebel was alive, and we used him to take us to the rebel base that we had to eliminate. In the process, though, he led us right into a mine that took away Pedro's life. And then, of course, we then took care of the rebel base. But I lost Pedro. And Kip Road, who's one of the long-term subscribers, suggested to me that why don't you try to go back and save Pedro? I mean, after all, I do have the ident for that moment where I was getting on the bus again for the mission. So I could do it. I think I answered to him that I wasn't going to do that because I was still kind of broken up about the whole situation. But the more I thought about it, the more I thought, well, maybe I could do something. Maybe I can go into the future this time and redo things so that Pedro doesn't die. So I decided to give it a try. The first time I went there, I arrived in my body the same time I did before when we were boarding the bus. And the same thing happened as happened before. The ambush happened. The combat stations in the bus wiped out the ambushers. And when we went out there, we found the rebel just like we did before. This time, though, I went up to Pedro and I said, hey, listen, I want to take point now instead of you. He looked at me and he was plainly annoyed. I mean, he still hadn't gotten over the whole thing about wanting to talk to me about the whole grenade incident. And he snapped at me and said, stop trying to grab all the gold decors. And then he walked off. I think that's gold decors. That's what they call, I think, medals, ribbons, that kind of stuff, military stuff. Gabriella, then, of course, if you remember, she was the smoking hot Latina that I kind of set up with my future self. She came up next to me. I guess she was nearby and said, "What's his defect?" I guess she overheard, our little conversation. I just said, "I don't know." And then she said, "Don't worry, I've got your back." So I said, "Thanks, guard." But this time, as we were approaching that bend to the left, I was ready. And I said, "Stop, Pedro." And he stopped short. And I was like, "Oh, thank goodness, I've saved him." So I just jogged up to him a few paces and I started talking to him and saying, "Hey," I have to explain this logically. I said, "Hey, rebels, they usually put mines on trails like this, when there's sharp turns." So he starts running the scanner, trying to find this thing, and I'm not paying attention. I mean, I should have known that the proper procedure is for the person behind me in cases like this when we're having a conversation. They should run up and take point to also keep track of the rebel. And Gabriella took point. I just saw her flashing by. Too late. An explosion. She fell to the ground. I ran up. I grabbed her. She gave a little smile. And then she passed. I couldn't justify, sorry, I couldn't justify trading her life for Pedro's. I mean, the only life that I'd be willing to sacrifice in a situation like this would be my own. And I sensed that my future self would be on board with that. But here we are. I saved Pedro, but Gabriella died. I returned to my body. I couldn't leave things the way they were. I couldn't. That wasn't right. So I went back for a second time. This time, I took the rebel aside right before we started on the trail, and I looked him straight in the eye. And I said, "I know there's going to be a mine on that trail right before a sharp turn to the left. If you want to keep breathing, you're going to point it out. Am I clear?" He looked at me like he'd seen a ghost. He just kind of nodded his head fast. And then we started walking. Pedro was on point. I didn't want to upset him, Plus, I had my eye on that rebel. And right before we got to that place where Pedro died before, the rebel put up his hand and Pedro stopped dead, even with the rebel. So I breathed a sigh of relief that I was able to save not only Pedro, but Gabriella too. But 1 second later, the rebel grabbed Pedro's sidearm, and before I could do anything, shot him right in the head, and Pedro fell. Then he pointed at me, but before he could, I took him out. But I went up, and there was Pedro, gone. I returned to my body. I figured, okay, I can do this. There has to be a way for me to save Pedro and make sure that none of my guys die. And if somebody has to, it should be me. So this time, we went through the whole thing, the ambush again, whole 9 yards. I grabbed Pedro and I said, I'm going to take point. That's all there is to it. Because my rank was, I was in service a little bit longer than him. So my rank was a little bit higher because of time in service. But he turned on me and he said, "What's wrong with you, guard? Are you trying to F up my career so that you can get an officer slot?" I was stunned. I didn't know what to say. I just kind of, no. And then he goes, "Listen, I know you pulled that stunt with the, what did he call it again? Let's just call it a grenade. I forget what he called it. There was a lot going on. He said, because you wanted me to get the effing blame so that you get the officer slot. I said, no, that's not it. He goes, F you, puta. We're no longer friends. Now take your position behind me and shut the F up. What can I do? Why is this constantly going wrong? No matter what I do. But I still knew where the mine was. I could still warn him. So I took up my place behind him, Gabriella behind me. And as we were approaching the mine, I yelled out to Pedro, stop! He flashed me the finger and kept on going. He passed away in my arms again. After that, I just returned to my body. I didn't know what else to do. No matter what I tried, somebody ended up dying. And it was always Pedro, usually, or Gabriella. I'll be honest with you, I tried a few more times, but I don't want to get into it because it never worked. It never worked, no matter what I did. I've thought about it a lot since I had this experience. It was a few nights ago. And I told myself that, of course, he's not really gone. He's not even born yet, but that's not what I mean. I mean, none of us ever really disappear, go away, pass on. We're spiritual beings who are so much more than the physical meat body that we all walk around in. We have many lives. We have our experiences. We have our friends. We have our enemies. We have our lovers. But we take that information, and when we pass on, it gets uploaded to the Oversoul, and we grow as a being. We're always growing as a being. We are eternal. We will never be gone. We will always be here. And in that belief and that certainty that I have, I feel better. Because we're all star stuff, right? And we're eternal. That which makes us who we really are is not encased in this physical shell. We're so much more than that. So much more. So that's what I wanted to share with you. And once again, I just want to thank everyone who is a part of Astral Club. I appreciate each and every one of you. And I'm thankful for having Astral Club each and every day of my life. If you'd like to add any messages, questions, comments, please do so. If you benefited from this episode in any way, please like it. Subscribe if you haven't. And geez, the vast majority of you have. It's incredible how many people have subscribed. I haven't seen another channel on YouTube that has this high a level subscriber rate. So how can I not be extremely grateful? And if you feel moved to leave a comment or a question, please do so. This is Rick, and I will see you on the astral plane.